Science fiction author Kurt Vonnegut, when asked how to write a short story, said, "Start at the end." This story starts at the end of time. I'm here to tell you that time doesn't exist. What does that mean? Well, to try and get a sense of what it might mean to say that time doesn't exist, we can start by thinking about what it means to say that time exists. So what I want you to do is imagine a number line stretched out from 1 to infinity. Now, from this number line, we can take away the numbers, and we can imagine these as moments in time stretched from the past to the future. Once we've imagined time in this way, we can start to populate it with events. We can add the Big Bang at the beginning of the universe. And then, a little while later, we can add the Earth as it evolves. And then, down the track, a little bit longer, we've got people as they evolve on the Earth. And then, way down in the future, after we're all dead and gone, we've got sentient robots, which come to the fore and take over the universe. And then finally, the big crunch, the end of all things. So that gives us our picture of time. To get a picture of what it would be for time not to exist, what we're going to do is we're going to take each of those events and we're going to get rid of the little connections between them. So we're going to take our timeline and we're going to remove the links between each moment. And then we're going to get rid of the moments themselves. And once we've got rid of the moments, we can capture each of these events in a kind of spatial bubble. Each event is living in its own little universe. And that's sort of what it's like to say that time doesn't exist. The universe is fragmented into pieces, and each piece lives on its own. The idea that time doesn't exist might seem to you to be a crazy idea. But in fact, the idea of time not existing has had a long history in thought. So here's a brief history of timelessness. If we go back to early Buddhism, we see that the idea that time doesn't exist is a central part of Buddhist thought. When you meditate, supposedly, when you enter higher meditative states, and indeed when you reach nirvana, you lose a sense of reality. The things that you experience one by one drift away. Then yourself starts to drift away, and with yourself, you lose a sense of time. Time itself turns out to be an illusion in Buddhist thought. Wind the clock forward to the 17th century, Immanuel Kant thought that time was something that we bring to the world. Time's not some aspect out there in the universe ready for us to discover. Rather, time is painted on by our minds. Time is a kind of projection onto reality. A little while later again, into the 20th century, the philosopher John McTaggart argues that if time exists, if time is part of the universe, then the universe would be deeply paradoxical. Contradictions would turn up all over the place. And so he argued, time can't exist. It's a fundamentally incoherent notion to begin with. And then again, forward into the 1940s, the mathematician Kurt Gödel, based on studying Einstein's theory of relativity, concludes that time is ideal. It's a feature of our minds and not some feature of reality. Indeed, Gödel thinks he's got a mathematical proof that time is not real. Of course, these are claims being made outside of science in some sense. Philosophers, Buddhists, mathematicians. And what we might wonder is, what's the scientific basis for thinking that time doesn't exist? Now, if you look at our best science, it would be easy to think that time is absolutely essential to the scientific worldview. Let's think about Newton's picture of the universe. Newton, living during the Industrial Revolution, was raised on clocks and machinery and the wonder that they brought to his world. And he looked up into the heavens, thinking of the machinery that was around him, and sought to tame the heavens themselves using the very principles that people were using to understand machinery and build production. And so he develops the mechanics. And the mechanics is a beautiful mathematical system which treats the movement of the planets like clockwork, like machinery. And if you look in Newton's mechanical system, you see that time is an absolutely essential component. Time for Newton is like a wave that flows absolutely into the future, dragging us all towards our dooms. And it's the arena in which everything unfolds. But as we move into the 20th century, and we look at the way that physics was revolutionized first by Einstein, and then later on with the development of quantum mechanics, we can see that time is being eroded even in science. And we're getting to a point now, in our current physics, where the claims that are being made are not unlike the kinds of claims that Buddhists were making. So, if we look at Einstein's theory of relativity, we can already see that time has taken a much smaller role in the way that we understand the universe. Whereas for Newton, time is this essential aspect, this wave that drags us forward into the future. For Einstein, time depends on how fast you're going. As you speed up, time slows down. And now this can have absolutely startling consequences. Consider two people. One person standing on the Earth, and another person who gets in a spaceship and travels at half the speed of light on a round trip back to Earth. For that person on the spaceship, if they're going fast enough, maybe 2 years will pass. For someone on the Earth, 2,000 years might pass. The very distance between events, the lives that these people live, depends on their relative states of motion. And this is completely revolutionary compared to the way that Newton was thinking about time. For Newton, time is this fixed point in the physics. When you get into Einstein's theory, time becomes a part of the dynamics themselves. As things happen, time itself warps and bends and changes. But things get even worse. This brings us to current physics and the current crisis that we see in physics. In physics, we have two very good theories, our two best theories ever. Theory of the very small, quantum mechanics, which gives us an account of small-scale interactions between particles, and a theory of the very big, which gives us an account of the universe at large scales and gives us an account of things like gravity. Unfortunately, quantum mechanics and general relativity don't play well together. What this means is that if you take quantum mechanics and you try to scale it up so that it gives you an account of the universe at large scales, it gives the wrong predictions. If you take general relativity and try to scale it down so that it gives an account of gravitation at very small scales, it gives you the wrong predictions. We don't have a theory yet that combines these two scales to give us an account of the universe at every scale. Now, one of the problems has to do with time. The notion of time that we find in quantum mechanics is much more like Newton's conception of time, this absolute wave that flows into the future. The notion of time that we have in general relativity is this relativistic conception, this notion of time as something that depends on how fast you're going. And because of these different notions of time, we get this conflict between these two fundamental theories. And so, some physicists have suggested, if time's the problem, then let's just get rid of time. Let's build a new physics, one that has no time in it, and tell our story of the universe that way. And so what we see is the kinds of claims that are being made in current physics are reflecting this history of thought about timelessness. If time doesn't exist, as physicists suggest, the implications are absolutely radical. Think about it. You woke up this morning and you thought, I'm going to plan my day. And you worked out what it was you were going to do. You were going to plan to come here, you're going to plan to have a coffee, all of these events that you're organizing your life around. But if time doesn't exist, then there's no such thing as the future. There is no future to plan for, so your planning is completely pointless. Similarly, you might have woken up this morning and felt bad for something you did yesterday. But what happened yesterday is in the past, and the past doesn't exist because there's no such thing as time. And if the past doesn't exist, then there's no sense in which it's reasonable for you to feel bad about things that you did because nothing happened. Right? Now, you might think that this is a get-out-of-jail-free card, right? But what it does is it seems to rob us of our very agency, that very aspect that makes us human, our ability to plan for the future and to feel bad about the things that we did in the past, seems to go as we get these developments in physics, as we lose a concept of time. So what I want to do is I want to suggest a solution to you. I want to give you a way of thinking about time that can accommodate these developments in physics, but still enable you to keep hold of your humanity. So here's the idea. We're going to think about the relationship between time and change. The usual way of thinking about the relationship between time and change is to think of time as a kind of container in which things happen. Indeed, the picture that I began with was exactly of this sort. Time is a medium through which events occur. And as they occur, they change and things happen, and that's the unfolding of the universe. Instead of thinking of change as the thing that happens in time, we're going to take change as our starting point, and we're going to treat time as a way of measuring and understanding change. In this way, time becomes something much more like a unit of measure than some physical aspect of the universe. So think about mass. Mass is a physical concept. Mass is something that things have. Things weigh stuff, right? You can pick them up, you can feel their weight. But we have different ways, different socially constructed ways of thinking about the mass of an object. We can think of it in terms of kilograms, we can think of it in terms of pounds. You could invent your own bespoke system for measuring the weight of things and apply that. So that's how we should think of time. There is a physical thing in the world, that's change. The world does change. And time is something that we've made, a kind of social construction for measuring and cataloging and categorizing and organizing the changes that we experience around us. If we think of the relationship between time and change in this way, then we can keep hold of our future planning. I mean, if there's one thing we know, it's that things are going to change. And because things are going to change, it makes sense to plan for those changes. We also know that things have changed. That thing that you did yesterday that you feel bad about, that is something that really happened. That is an event that you brought about, that you changed, that you induced in the world. So you can still feel bad for things that you did, and you can still plan for the future, but you don't have to believe in the existence of time. Now, in some sense, what this means is that it's business as usual, right? We've got this way of thinking about time in physics, namely there isn't any. We have this startling implication for our everyday lives, and I've given you a way of just pretty much ignoring what's going on in physics and living your life as ever you did. So what's the point? Well, the point is that time on this picture is something that comes from us. It's like that view of time that Immanuel Kant had. It's something that we're projecting onto the world. The way that we usually think about time is as something that happens to us. It's something that pulls us into the future, right? As you feel your death coming towards you, step by step, you feel inexorably pulled by time towards that event. But if time is something that we've made, if time is a kind of social construction, then it turns out that we are the masters of time. Thank you.